Welcome to the American Family Association's weekly cable program. AFA is a national organization devoted to strengthening the American family, the very foundation of our civilization. Tonight's topic is the Healthy Respect Program, and our host is Frank Russo.
Good evening, welcome everyone. Healthy Respect is an abstinence education program which shows the power and delicacy of human reproductive faculties by employing highly trained instructor teams to present 23 interactive sessions that challenge and encourage young people to adopt abstinence until marriage as a desirable and achievable lifestyle. Parents are recognized as the primary educators in the area of human sexuality. Classroom instruction is reinforced through parent workshops, peer educator, and after-school lessons. The program has reached over 3,500 public school students in grades 6 to 12 in the metropolitan New York area. The Long Island program began in 2007 in Freeport and Hempstead. Joining us tonight are Lorraine Garibaldi of the Life Center of Long Island and John Margand of Healthy Respect. And joining me in the questioning is Connell Friel.
Thank you, Frank. Lorraine, you've indicated there's a crisis in this country with teen pregnancy, and what are the implications of teen sexual activity?
Well, we clearly see that at the Life Center of Long Island. We've been in existence here for 20 years. We now have a location in Deer Park, Massapequa, and Hempstead. And we know firsthand that every day young teenagers are walking in our doors asking for pregnancy tests. And so we recognize that there really is a need for abstinence education. It's good to help pregnant teens, but it's also the more desirable would be to prevent them from being pregnant in the first place through abstinence. And so last year, the Life Center applied for the grant for community-based abstinence education, and to bring the program to Long Island through the Life Center using the Healthy Respect program. We applied, and the government granted us a 5-year grant to do that. And we're presently working with Freeport High School and Hempstead High School.
Very good.
Right.
Exciting.
Besides the medical implications, what are the economic and emotional implications for these
Well,
children?
the truth is that we know that teenagers who have children are less likely to graduate high school. Their children are less likely to graduate. They generally have a lifelong lesser earning capacity than their peers who finish high school, and especially compared to those who go on to college.
Okay, and let me ask John. John, you've headed Healthy Respect now. You're in New York City. What is the basic methodology used, and what's the content of the Healthy Respect program?
Well, Frank, it's initially when we developed the program, we looked around the country to find what we thought were the best programs available with respect to abstinence programming. I mean, abstinence programs are relatively new. They're new on the scene. They're only most of them are under 10 years old.
Oh.
And the point of one of the core things that struck us immediately was the concept of the youth development model. That is, while we have a crisis in teen pregnancy, the youth development model looks at individuals as to draw out their potential and not merely focus on the negative behaviors, but try to draw out some positive focuses. And really it comes down to a return, if you will, to character education, to virtue, to sustaining healthy long-term relationships and incorporating those skill sets that are required to achieve that and sustain that for healthy marriages. So in sum, the content of the program reflects that. Looking around the nation, we didn't find one that we felt was particularly suited to the New York area. So what we decided to do was to implement what we could here, and we came up with an intensive program, 23 sessions, iterative, going year to year to year, because we have no illusions about the mountain we're climbing here. We're talking about changing the behaviors of young persons and steering them towards healthy behaviors. So The content is relatively heavy, but it's highly interactive. There's a component for communication, just basic communication and classroom management. Human growth and development, a key portion of the program that is designed to draw the students' attention to the power and the delicacy of their own human reproductive faculties. You can't value what you don't know. So, and most of our students are really not very well versed in just basics in biology. We try to go beyond biology, though, and try to move into the self-esteem issues. That is laying the foundation for students to be good stewards of their bodies. Just not merely hygiene, but also directing sexual activity in appropriate venues. And also family life.
What's the reason for using the team approach of instruction?
Well, the team approach is, we think, important because we can talk about a healthy relationship, but we would rather demonstrate it. So we use young, we draw on young male-female instructors who are close in age as we
So
can.
they're teams of men and women?
Young men, young women.
Oh, I see.
That
Okay.
provides versatility for some delicate subjects. In the classrooms, we can separate the students, but we can also model this healthy interactive relationship. And we were very excited about the possibility of working with Lorraine Garibaldi and the Life Center, which is a very, very strong community partner. We have a relationship with the Life Center, have over 7, 8 years now.
Yeah.
We collaborate on many other projects. But the Life Center sees 250 young women every month who are in distress, has a very strong community bond, and is very, very well connected and what we call connected to the community here on Long Island. It's where I grew up, incidentally. I grew up in Suffolk County, in Center Ridge. But it does take a partnership. You can have the best program in the world, but you'd still need strong community partners who will take the message beyond the classroom and into the community, and that's what our goal is.
How important are parents in dealing with the crisis, and how do you
That's a good
reach out to
question.
parents and bring them in?
Lorraine, why don't you?
It's very important. It's interesting that if you ask children where they want to get their information from about sexual behavior, they would say their number one resource is their parents. And yet if you ask the parents, they say, oh, their children get it from their peers. But the parent is where they obviously should be getting it. And so we do have a parent component. John, you want to talk about that?
Sure. It's a fact. It's not a normative statement. It's a fact that parents are the primary educators of their children in human sexuality. Mm-hmm. Every stat that you get from the CDC, NIH, National Institute for Health, will bear that out, that students, as Lorraine indicated, want to know what their parents think, and they're most influenced by what their parents think about what they say and what they don't say about sexual matters. So, and while programs are important, what our goal is to emphasize what is more important. That's the parent-child relationship. If we can open this discussion so that children feel comfortable approaching their own parents, and if we can at the same time underline the fact to parents how important it is to communicate with their children about this, and at least provide them some basic suggestions about how to approach the subject as early as 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, age appropriate, but that students then or children will look to their parents as the experts on these matters and not to harmful sources such as media and inaccurate information that you would get from their peers or other areas.
Many children think that if they bring up the subject of sexual activity to ask the questions with their parents, that their parents will think they're sexually active or accuse them of being, so they avoid the conversation. But part of the program is to take home, there is homework, parent homework, to go home and discuss these issues with your parents. Isn't that right,
Yes,
John?
it
And
is.
just to make, I've heard this so long, but most parents, I don't think, really discuss sexual matters with their children. I mean, it is the ideal, and it should be, it's what should happen, but I don't think it does. Do you think it's more, too, how the parents behave, like what kind of magazines they're getting in the house, what TV shows they're going to, if the marriage is solid or if the marriage is fragile, and for what reasons it might be fragile? Isn't it what the kids observe almost more than what's directly said?
I think it's both.
It is, okay.
Any teacher knows that you teach by example very, very powerfully. And the example that is set gives life or draws life away from the words that are said. But when it comes to sexual matters, a verbal conversation where the expectations are clearly set forth is absolutely essential. And frankly, we're not doing that in this country. I have 6 children, and I try to communicate with them all the time. But I also know that the questions they bring up, I've got to address them. I've got to be in constant communication. And it's not merely communicating about sexual activity. It's communicating about a host of other
Your
issues.
moral values.
Moral values. These are things that we have we've lost our way as a country. And that's what we're trying to revitalize and bring life to.
You also use after-school sessions and peer educator components. What's the reason for this?
Well, we know that children, students, listen to their peers. So, for example, if we have 8th graders going through the program this year, next year we will glean from that group peer educators who obviously know the subject now and will speak to a lesser grade like the 7th grade after school. And with that, we have a scholarship program for those peer educators, so to encourage them to do this. And then the scholarship goes to the college of their choice.
But to get to the underlying rationale for that is, while parents are number one, it's nice for a student to hear from a peer that they have made a decision to maintain an abstinent lifestyle, and why. Our peer educators are in the 9th grade and high school, and they come down to the middle school. But we've noticed when a high school kid comes into a middle school, and in middle school are very rambunctious children. In 7th and 8th, classroom management challenges for middle school are up there, even tougher than in the high school. But when a high school child comes into that room, the whole room is quiet because they want to hear it. That's where they're going. They see this 10th grader or 9th grader as very close to them in age. And if that 10th grader or 9th grader can convey why they remain abstinent, that echoes or supports the parental message at the same time. So it's a powerful tool. It's also a leadership opportunity for high school students to demonstrate character. And they're selected carefully, by the way. We train those peer educators very, very carefully that they're medically accurate, that what their information that they give out is solid. And they have to earn that scholarship. So if they do not, then they don't get the scholarship. And that's, again, targeted specifically for higher education of some kind.
You know, and I remember when my wife and I were preparing for pre-Caner that, are we at the halfway point? Let's take 1 minute out for a quick public service announcement. We'll be right back.
So how was work?
Brutal. One meeting after another. I got a ton to do tonight.
At the end of the day, when the weight of the world is upon you,
Daddy doesn't want to play. Hey!
isn't it amazing
All right.
how the weight of their love can lift you up again?
Hey, you guys coming to dinner? Hey, guys.
For a free brochure about rediscovering the joy of your children, call 1-800-A-FAMILY. Focus on the family.
Thanks for staying with us. We're talking about the Healthy Respect program with Lorraine Garibaldi of the Life Center and John Margand, who heads the Healthy Respect program in New York City in the Bronx. Another question, too. In my sense, I was starting to say, when my wife and I prepared to teach pre-Caner for about 5 years, I think a very important factor, and I did a lot of research back then looking at studies, is that to the extent the parents themselves practice their faith, go to church weekly, not just at Christmas and Easter, you see a high correlation between children who behave properly, who abstain from sexual activity longer, often until they're married, if the parents themselves are faithful and go to church. On the other hand, if they just put on a show and parents never go to church, there was a high correlation with premarital sexual activity on the part of children from those. Is there any evidence to that? I mean, that was 10 years ago when I did that research.
I think there's a strong link to providing other supports to what we're talking about as virtue. I mean, the Healthy Respect program is a secular program. It's in the public school system, but it discusses character and virtue. I think our founding fathers were clear on the importance of community support and religion in particular in bolstering virtue and in providing sustaining effort. But there are also many families whom we reach where those resources are less than perfect, and our goal is to provide hope, because many of the parents we deal with are single parents,
Right.
and their concerns that they have not, they want this for their children.
Right.
They want their children to succeed, but they don't feel that they have the moral authority to don't do what I did, but do something different.
Right.
The reality is that they don't have to feel that way, because we can reach. They, as parents, can exercise that same parental authority, share what's appropriate about their personal life, but exercise their role as parents to point a better way. And it's, don't go this route, I understand this way, I want something better for you. And that's an important message to get out if we're going to try to reignite or develop a sexual counter-revolution and draw on whatever community resources we have. A faith-based community is an ideal place for a parent to draw strength from.
Well, let me ask you, in the 1950s, we had they called it an illegitimacy rate now. We don't like to use that term. Children born with no father at home was about 5%. Now it's 37%. This is mind-boggling. It was 33% just a few years ago. The recent data, 3 out of every 8 children born last year, no father at home. A lot of people are saying that abstinence education programs are hopeless. They don't work. That the way the media is today, with the filth that's on TV, that kids are going to engage in sexual activity no matter what. How do you, and they challenge these abstinence education programs' effectiveness.
May I just say something, Frank? We tell our children to say no to drugs, yet we know there will be children taking drugs. We tell them not to drive while they're intoxicated, yet we know they will. We have to bring the truth, the message
Very
to
good
them.
point, Lorraine.
Yeah.
The other thing is we keep talking about the failure rates of children. And the reality is, I firmly believe, and I think the evidence will support this, that it's not so much the children who have failed, it's that we have failed our children.
Yeah.
And we have not demanded enough of them in terms of personal example, in terms of challenging them to achieve certain levels of performance. Children will perform in accordance with our expectations. That's a classic
Given.
piece out of any pedagogical manual. So why shouldn't we raise the bar? With respect to the so-called failure rates, let me just say 2 things. Recent studies which have been hypercritical of abstinence education programs, which is a new field, by the way, are talking about programs that only had 7th and 8th grade, no follow-on in the high school. So it's it's a bit like putting a
Ridiculous,
Band-Aid on a
yeah,
cancer.
yeah.
You must have repetition, you must have community to support. We have no illusions about that this is a major crisis, and if we don't get a handle on addressing sexual activity and reconnecting healthy family life, our nation as a whole, I don't think we've begun to calculate the economic, the emotional, or the financial, or the disease cost of that.
Oh, absolutely.
The other thing I am really, I think needs to be drilled home here is the so-called comprehensive sex ed model has been an abysmal failure. And I challenge any journalist to really take a hard look at that. Because if we're going to be authentic journalists, we have to look at what hasn't worked. And the so-called comprehensive sex ed model has been a consistent, a persistent failure over the last 30 years. It is clearly time for fresh thinking with respect to how we address matters of teen sexual activity. And our students deserve a healthy, safe venue for that. And that's what we try to provide.
You know, you say comprehensive sex. We're in the mess we are in
Because
because
of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's time we can begin to make a change in the thinking. We were invited to a health fair at Brentwood High School a couple of weeks ago, and our Healthy Respect teachers had a display table talking about abstinence. They were flooded with the students, flooded. They wanted to hear more, give more, get more information. How come no one's telling us this message? We're not telling our children they can say no. What's wrong with that?
Well, the results that I've seen, too, corroborate exactly what you said, that the worst is the current kinds of programs that they have where they're saying, better to abstain, but we know you're not going to, so here's a condom, and here's how you avoid disease and pregnancy and so forth. And I'll tell you what they're also missing, again, and I get a lot of studies on this myself, they're missing the emotional impact. Forget the risk of pregnancy, which is bad enough, the risk of getting a sexually transmitted disease, which is bad enough. But even if they avoid the disease, they avoid the pregnancy, the emotional problems created for those people, I mean, you just look at the people who have had sex with 10 different men or women before they get married, what's the chances their marriage is going to be successful? I mean, the data is very highly correlative there, too. You're going to see divorce rates corresponding to the premarital sexual rates of activity. So,
young women.
Let me ask you about this, I heard there were independent evaluations from Queens
Yes.
College.
Yes.
I don't know much about it. I just heard that that was done.
We've turned, evaluation is crucial here. And one of the advantages of the criticism that has been posed, which is really somewhat a fear-based criticism of abstinence programs, from as we challenge the standard on sexual health, is that we've been able to take a hard look at what we're doing and is it effective. We can have a strong message and still not necessarily achieve the goal, which is behavior change. So we've turned to two professors over at Queens College, Dr. Dillon, whose PhD is from the University of Pennsylvania, a sociologist there, an associate professor, and Dr. Weinberg, whose PhD is from Harvard and an assistant professor there, to help us in our evaluation. And what we're measuring in these early years are attitudinal shifts in terms of, well, knowledge and attitude. And we've had some, we were asked to a national conference in Baltimore last month to display or to share with the federal government our initial results, and they've been encouraging on two counts. One is we've been able to show a very significant shift in the understanding that abstinence is the only 100% effective way to avoid pregnancy, unwanted pregnancy, and to avoid disease, sexually transmitted infections. Those are, and we're talking about shifts that are going against the grain. Our comparison group, and a comparison group, incidentally, is a group of students who do not get the program, but they get the same survey. So we have a pre- and post-course survey for both groups. The comparison group is shifting in a negative direction, where and ours are going in a positive direction in the same demographic. So we're kind of now swimming upstream. That's encouraging on one level because we're seeing early signs of the effect of the program. It's discouraging because we see that as these students get older, they're moving rapidly in the wrong direction. So that drills home the point to us for the need for iterative, repeated sessions, because we're not merely talking about having information, we're talking about incorporating it and living it out, which is going to require support from the school system, support primarily from parents, and community support. And it's going to take every resource that we can bring to bear on this if we're going to have hope of succeed.
High schools, too.
The high school and middle school,
Right.
yes.
And you get no help from the oversexed culture, the media, and the movies and television.
None at all, which is why we have a media component to the program. Where we do. It's that's why we have 23 sessions. We have one of them which we invite the students to have take a critical look at the media. They bring in the magazines. They're reading them anyway. We bring them in and say, well, take a look at what's being presented to you and what's the message and why is it being presented. And the students are very savvy. They don't necessarily get it immediately, but they start quickly connect the dots that their sex drive is being manipulated for profit. And once that, at least we've planted that seed so that they begin to develop a critical view of the media.
Lorraine, will federal funding continue for abstinence education programs, and does it need to be diversified from local sources to ensure its stability?
I choose to believe that it will, and I'm concerned, as many people are concerned about the change in control of the Congress, but the reality is that the abstinence funding first originated at the time of Clinton. He put it into place, and of course George Bush has increased the funding, but I think that if they would just give us the time, these longitudinal studies will prove that we are making a difference, and we do know we're making a difference. And one of the major reasons children, teens, are are postponing their onset of sexual activity. And we know that if we can do that, if we can get our teens to postpone it until they're in a out of high school, hopefully out of college, mature enough to make a responsible choice about their behavior, that there will be many, many less teen pregnancies, many less sexually transmitted diseases, and many less sexual partners within a lifetime of that teenager. And that really, I know what the ideal goal is, abstinence until marriage, but if we can do all of that, and we are, making a difference, making those shifts across the country with abstinence programs, that's a wonderful thing.
We're down to the last 2 minutes. And I have to admit, I look at the numbers, I look at studies. I must have 2,000 studies that I've gotten from the Howard Center for the Study of the Family in America. If you're familiar with the Howard Center, formerly the Rockford Center, the divorce rates are at 50%. 1 out of every 2 marriages winds up in divorce. The rate of children born, as I said, no father at home, 3 out of 8, 37%. That's mind-boggling. In the African American community, 7 out of 10. Hispanic community, 5 out of 10. The white community, it rose from 1 out of 25 to 5 out of 25, over 5 out of 6 out of 25. It's horrendous. How hopeful are you that and the consequences, by the way, of this problem on the taxpayers is enormous. I mean, just to put it in economic sense, the drug abuse, the poverty, the crime, the educational problems. How hopeful are you that this program could make a difference in 1 minute that we've got left?
I'm very hopeful. The question isn't if we're going to address the issue. The question is how we will succeed.
How could they contact you? If people are watching this, who should they contact? Either one of you, the Life Center, or
either one.
Either one of us. We're going to put up your names and addresses.
For details about the content of the program, I invite you to come to our website, which is www.healthrespect.org. There's no Y in that.
No Y. Healthrespect.org.
Gives you a basic overview of the program. And of course, Lorraine has
the Life Center of Long Island.
Right.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, I'm hoping that the people that are watching, if they're concerned about their children, other people's children, and the economic consequences of the problem that we now see as a result of improper sexual activity, they will contact either the Life Center or you, John, at Healthy Respect, but it's healthrespect.org. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to thank our viewers for staying tuned. We'll see you next week, same time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.